Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're not just reading a book. We are doing a full forensic psychological audit on what might be one of the deepest, most challenging works ever conceived. I'm talking about Fyodor Dostoevsky's colossal novel, The Brothers Karamazov. We're going to be navigating this treacherous landscape of passion, nihilism, faith, and of course the ultimate family crime, parricide.
And the sources you've presented here are they're overwhelming. It's high philosophy, it's intimate character study, and it's this meticulously detailed crime analysis all rolled into one.
Right.
So our mission today, I think, has to be to cut through that density. We have to map this fractured Karamazov family. You have the repulsive father, Fyodor Pavlovich,
Yes.
and his three defining sons, the reckless, passionate Dmitri or Mitya, the cold, intellectual Ivan, and then the devout, yet troubled Alyosha.
And this dive goes even deeper than that, doesn't it?
It has to. We need to extract and really analyze the philosophical conflicts, especially that famous legend, the Grand Inquisitor. And then we have to meticulously chart the psychological and, the factual path that leads to the murder and the trial.
So this is basically the essential shortcut, the foundational structure and insights of Dostoevsky's masterpiece.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're dealing with a narrative it's a murder mystery and a spiritual testament at the same time. To even start, we have to look at the poisoned roots, because everything that happens to these sons is a direct, almost perverse reflection of their father. So, Fyodor Pavlovich, let's start there. The descriptions they're immediate and they are damning. He's called a worthless, puny weakling, but somehow he has this incredible, chaotic power.
It's the ultimate paradox of the Karamazov patriarch, isn't it? He's weak in character, absolutely, but he's monstrously strong in sheer ego, in self-absorption.
Also.
Well, the sources detail it really specifically. When he loses his first wife, Adelaida Ivanovna, a woman of means who left him, he didn't grieve privately.
No. What did he do?
He followed her, sometimes across the province, not to get her back, but to complain tearfully, to air out all the disgraceful details of their marriage to anyone who would listen.
That sounds less like a desperate husband and more like a performance artist specializing in public humiliation.
Precisely. That's a perfect way to put it. His deepest form of self-gratification was playing this ridiculous part of the injured husband. He thrived on it.
The attention.
The attention his own debasement brought him. The neighbors even said he looked so pleased in spite of your sorrow. And this right here, this is the first key insight into what the book calls the Karamazov nature.
Which is?
This perverse vanity where shame itself becomes a tool. He uses his own moral wretchedness as a source of power. It's really troubling.
It is troubling because it suggests his worst trait, his own debasement, was also his strongest weapon. So how does that perverse power show up in how he treats the children? Because the neglect is just astronomical.
It manifests as complete, utter abandonment. With Dmitri, his firstborn, the sources are explicit. After Adelaida left, Fyodor Pavlovich just entirely forgot the child existed.
Forgot.
Completely. Mitya was literally left with the old faithful servant, Grigory, for almost a whole year.
Yeah.
He was an object to be neglected, not a son to be nurtured.
And that void.
That lack of foundational love is the void the Karamazov sons spend their entire lives trying to fill. With passion, with philosophy, with faith, whatever they can find.
And the tragedy just repeated itself, maybe even more horribly, with the second wife, Sofia Ivanovna, Ivan and Alyosha's mother.
Yes. She died suddenly, a victim of his absolute indifference, died in a garret. There were conflicting reports, typhus or starvation.
Either way,
it just underscores the lethal environment he created. And when he heard the news, he was drunk. And according to this horrific legend, he ran into the street shouting, "It serves her right. God has punished her for her ingratitude."
the cruelty is just staggering, a complete absence of basic humanity. But he wasn't entirely immune to judgment, right? Even if it was delayed. The sources give us that wonderfully vivid, brief moment of external justice when the general's widow shows up.
It's 8 years after Sophia's death, but the moral outrage is still there. This general's widow seeks him out, goes straight to his house, and without a single word,
She just
gives him 2 good, resounding slaps. It was a moment of sharp, visceral repudiation, a signal that society, it recognized his moral debt, even if the law did not.
Okay, so now we see how this chaotic, poisoned environment shaped the sons. They are all, in their own way, trying to flee the legacy of that house. But they take these drastically different routes.
And their trajectories. This is the core framework of the novel's whole intellectual map. You're seeing 3 distinct coping mechanisms for surviving the Karamazov legacy.
Let's start with Ivan the intellectual. He didn't try to outfight the chaos. He tried to outthink it.
That's it, exactly.
Ah.
Ivan's response was radical intellectual detachment. He left early, he excelled academically, became known in literary circles in Moscow. His intelligence was immediately recognized.
Right, with that strange article he wrote.
The strange article on an unexpected subject, yeah. He's the result of pure, disembodied intellect, a mind that found no emotional connection at home, and so it retreated entirely into theory and philosophy. And now he's preparing to leave Russia with a good sum of money, trying to buy his freedom.
Alyosha, the third son, takes the complete opposite path. The path of faith, of spiritual absorption.
Alyosha is, well, he's silent and preoccupied. He's not drawn to worldly things, but to what the book calls an ideal escape.
The monastery.
The monastery, seeking refuge and guidance from the famous elder Zosima. And his psychological anchor isn't logic or passion. It's a memory of his mother's face. A memory he calls frenzied but beautiful when she was bowing before an icon. This suggests that for Alyosha, the path to faith is tied up with this intense, almost painful emotional memory. He's trying to transmute that early suffering into something sacred.
And then there's Mitya, the eldest, who is maybe the most faithful reflection of the father, but with this tragic theatrical twist of honor. His fate is just explosive and immediate, and it hinges on money.
Yes, Mitya is the Karamazov sensuality, just distilled, but it's burdened with a crushing conscience. The specific circumstance that led to the catastrophe is his conviction that he was cheated.
By his father, out of his mother's inheritance.
Right. And the source material makes it clear. The foundational family discord is rooted in financial betrayal and this passionate rivalry over a woman, Grushenka. Mitya, unlike Ivan, who deals in abstract philosophy, deals only in immediate, fiery, material things, debt and passionate possession.
It's clear the physical neglect created chaos, but now we have to look at these opposite poles of metaphysical discipline. You've got the radical submission of Alyosha and the radical rejection of Ivan. Let's start with Alyosha's choice. The monastery and the starets.
Right. The monastery provides the moral framework that Ivan and Mitya are constantly rebelling against. And the figure of the starets, the elder, is a crucial, distinct tradition in Russian monasticism. Dostoevsky himself championed it against the more formal, rigid church structures.
It goes way back, right? Mount Athos and places like that.
For centuries, yes. And it's a path of radical spiritual mentorship.
Okay, so let's unpack that definition of the starets. We know it's a commitment, but just how radical is it?
Well, they often call it a terrible school of abnegation. The novice choosing an elder. He renounces his own individual will completely, yields it in complete, humble submission.
And this is voluntary.
Entirely voluntary. It's undertaken for the hope of self-conquest, of self-mastery. The idea is that by stripping away the vanity of your own choices and submitting to another's wisdom, you accelerate your own spiritual growth.
But Elder Zosima himself doesn't really fit that mold, does he? He's not some stern, fire and brimstone ascetic. He sounds fundamentally different.
He is. He's a progressive, almost radical embodiment of that ideal. Zosima was known for his lack of sternness, for being always almost gay. And his compassion was. It was profoundly directed toward human imperfection. The other monks noted he was more drawn to those who were more sinful, and the greater the sinner, the more he loved him.
That's a huge distinction.
It's crucial. He represents a merciful, accepting, proactive faith. And that stands in direct contrast to the harsh, judgmental asceticism of his rivals, like Father Ferapont, who just saw the world as a place to be feared and avoided.
Okay, so now we take that idea of radical spiritual submission, and we swing violently toward the radical intellectual rebellion of Ivan. And the intellectual core of the entire novel, I think, is his poem, The Grand Inquisitor. This is where all that abstract philosophy becomes tangible drama.
This is the moment where Ivan's philosophical identity just crystallizes, and it creates this profound tension with his earlier published work. Remember, Ivan published an article arguing that every earthly state should eventually be completely absorbed into the church.
Right, replacing civil law with divine law, a structure of absolute religious authority.
Yeah.
So he argues for absolute church authority in his academic work, but then writes a poem that completely annihilates the very foundation of Christianity's claim to authority. Why the split?
Because his published work is pure theory, the poem. The poem is his heart's rebellion. It attacks Christ's rejection of the devil's 3 temptations in the wilderness, which is what established the path of human freedom.
And the Inquisitor's argument is stunningly simple.
It is. That Christ loved humanity so much that he gave them freedom. But humanity is too weak, too suffering, too fragile to bear that gift. They need external authority. They crave it.
The scene itself is just designed to be chilling. 16th century Seville, Christ returns, and he's immediately imprisoned by this 90-year-old inquisitor. So what's the core indictment?
The indictment is that Christ made a catastrophic error. He valued freedom of choice above certainty and happiness. The inquisitor argues that the church, led by him and others, has spent 15 centuries correcting that mistake.
Correcting Christ's work.
Correcting it by taking on the burden of governing that terrible, unbearable freedom. And they do it through miracle, mystery, and authority.
Let's dedicate some serious time to these three temptations because they really outline the whole human tragedy as Dostoevsky saw it. First, the temptation to turn stones into bread.
Christ refused that challenge because he wanted belief to be an act of spiritual freedom, based on faith, not on some material reward.
But the inquisitor sees that as elitist.
The ultimate spiritual elitism. He argues that men are weak, they're hungry, they're terrified of uncertainty, they don't want freedom if it means they might starve. The masses will, without question, follow whoever promises them earthly bread.
Even if it means giving up their autonomy.
Even then, they'll sacrifice their moral and spiritual autonomy in a heartbeat to get it.
So it's a profound political and economic critique. It suggests that material stability will always win out over messy spiritual freedom.
Absolutely. The inquisitor predicts that men will ultimately cry out, "Feed us," and then ask of us virtue. He claims the church has now taken on that burden, feeding them, uniting them, and saving them from the terror of their own free will.
And by doing that, they gain absolute obedience.
That's it. It's the entire history of institutional power in a nutshell.
Okay, the second temptation. This one focuses on the need for visible proof. Miracle, mystery, and authority.
By refusing to leap from the temple, Christ rejected the power of the miracle, the clear, undeniable proof of his divine nature. The inquisitor claims men are desperate for certainty. They can't live with the insoluble mysteries of a faith built on personal freedom. They need a spectacle.
So the inquisitor is saying humanity prefers a comforting lie over a terrifying truth.
Precisely. They want to be saved from the responsibility that real freedom demands. He says they will eventually crawl fawning to our feet and whine to us, "Yes, you were right. Save us from ourselves."
And so the church has to deceive them for their own happiness.
It has to provide the mystery and the authority that Christ refused to force on them.
And the third temptation, earthly rule, which the inquisitor claims the church has now accepted in Christ's name.
Christ rejected universal earthly power, leaving men fragmented and vulnerable in their freedom. The inquisitor says the church has now taken on that burden of providing unity and security. By accepting the temptations, by taking power, providing bread, and using authority, the church guides the weak masses toward a stable, manageable happiness.
Even if that happiness is built on a lie and enforced servitude.
Yes. The inquisitor basically concludes by telling the silent Christ, "We've paid dearly for it, but at last we have corrected thee and shall reign in thy name." It's a devastating argument.
Which brings us to Ivan's ultimate final rebellion that goes beyond the inquisitor's logic. He doesn't just reject Christ's method, he rejects the very idea of a divine order if it requires human suffering.
Exactly. Ivan cannot accept a harmony, not even a promised eternal heaven, if it's built on the tears of innocence. The whole idea of redemption is moot if the price includes the pain of those who can't even comprehend sin or sacrifice.
And he uses these two truly artistically cruel examples to ground his argument in just unbearable reality. We need to sit with these for a moment.
They're chosen strategically to just annihilate any kind of intellectual detachment. The first is the general who sets his hounds on an 8-year-old surf boy, just for accidentally hurting a favorite hunting dog.
And the torture, the boys begging.
That's what drives Ivan mad. He demands the general must be shot, not for justice, but for pure, visceral repudiation.
And the second example is even more intimate, more horrifying.
It involves a general and his wife who habitually beat their own 7-year-old daughter with a birch rod because the father, who is like a psychological cousin to Fyodor Pavlovich, found literal sensuality in it.
It's Fyodor's perverse vanity just magnified into absolute evil. So Ivan's conclusion is just. It's stunning. He says even if he were told this suffering would purchase entry into eternal harmony, he wants no part of it.
The price is too high. He rejects the foundation of divine order that necessitates that kind of pain, especially in children. He argues he would rather be left with the unavenged suffering. He returns his ticket.
He's not an atheist because of logic, then.
No, it's out of profound moral, emotional indignation. And this deep ethical refusal is the engine of his entire psychological collapse later on.
So if Ivan's battle is in the mind, Mitya's tragedy is fought entirely in the body and the soul. It's driven by that same Karamazov sensuality we saw in the father, but it's all tangled up in this complex, almost pathological sense of honor.
Yes.
And his initial relationship with Katerina Ivanovna, or Katya, perfectly captures this contradiction.
That first encounter is absolutely pivotal. It establishes Mitya's moral oscillation. Katya, this proud, high-born young lady, was desperate to save her father from disgrace over some missing government money.
4,500 rubles.
Right. And she approaches Mitya, prepared to offer her honor in exchange for the debt.
And the expectation is that Mitya, the notorious rake, would just take advantage of her, but he does the opposite.
He has this intense, momentary flash of profound self-control. His centipede biting at his heart urges him to take her, but he resists. He gives her the money, but refuses to take her honor.
And that single act of virtue.
It transforms him, or at
Yeah.
least it transforms the way he sees himself.
Yes.
And it binds him to her in this impossible virtuous trap.
It's a classic example of Mitya elevating a moment of high drama over, genuine, quiet love.
Yes, Mitya even confesses later, she loves her own virtue, not me. The engagement was less about affection and more about sustaining that impossible, elevated, sacrificial moment. It forced Mitya into a role of honor that his volatile nature just couldn't maintain.
Which guarantees his downfall.
Absolutely.
And the mechanism of that downfall is the sacred debt. Katya entrusts him with 3,000 rubles to send to Moscow, and this money becomes the gauge of his honor, his chest.
The 3,000 rubles is the material representation of the virtue she imposed on him. And Mitya, utterly consumed by his passion for Grushenka, a passion that mirrored his father's rivalry, squandered half of it, 1,500 rubles, during a destructive drunken spree.
And this failure just torments him.
Relentlessly.
But why is that specific sum, that 1,500 rubles, so psychologically devastating to him? It's not just money, it's a moral barrier.
It confirms his baseness. It proves he's just like his father. He's obsessed with clearing his name. He's constantly vowing a thief and a pickpocket Dmitri Karamazov never can be.
So the debt is a measure of his soul.
Exactly. A sign that he failed the test of honor Katya laid out for him. His brain is literally giving way under the strain of needing that sum. Not to survive, but to morally justify his own existence.
And in this state of feverish psychological breakdown, he sends Alyosha on 2 desperate missions. He's clinging to the idea that only a miracle of divine providence can save him.
First, he begs Alyosha to go to their father for the money, hoping the old man might suddenly have a flicker of paternal charity.
Alyosha.
A very long shot. And second, crucially, he sends Alyosha to Katya with a coded message. He sends his compliments to you.
And that's not just a friendly greeting.
No, it is his definitive, irrevocable signal to break the engagement, to sever the bond of impossible honor that was suffocating him.
So the sources then move to the actual prelude to violence, the night of the crime. And Dostoevsky is so forensic about Mitya's preparations, we even see the selection of the weapon.
This is the genius of Dostoevsky's meticulous detail. Mitya, in his haste and frustration, just snatches up this small brass pestle from Fenya's table. The description is crucial. Not much more than 6 inches long.
And Fenya cries out.
She cries out, foreshadowing everything. Oh, Lord, he's going to murder someone. The weapon is acquired by chance, but its existence changes the entire trajectory of the night.
Mitya, believing Grushenka is inside his father's house, knows the secret signal to lure him out.
Yes, Fyodor Pavlovich, who was paranoid about his rivals, had established a code for Grushenka. 3 quick taps, 3 slower taps, 3 quick taps.
And Mitya uses it.
Uses the signal. And when Fyodor Pavlovich throws his head out the window, agitated and breathless, Mitya sees the feverish intensity in his eyes, and he knows he's alone. The rivalry over Grushenka is confirmed right there as the immediate physical catalyst.
But the pivotal moment of violence, the one that defines Mitya's immediate moral burden, it doesn't fall on the father. It falls on the old servant, Grigory.
Grigory, the faithful old man who actually raised Mitya, tries to intercept him near the fence. He catches Mitya trying to break in. And Mitya, in this blind, sudden rage born of his desperate state, strikes Grigory with the brass pestle.
And fells him.
Fells him like a log. Mitya immediately flees, horrified by the sight of blood on his hands. He even senselessly tries to wipe the blood from Grigory's head with a clean handkerchief.
And this is so critical for the trial later. Mitya is innocent of parricide. but he is guilty of a violent, possibly fatal assault on the man who was maybe the only real caregiver he ever had.
Yes, striking Grigori is Mitya's actual immediate moral sin, and it's what sets him on the path of self-condemnation.
So even as Mitya is racing toward his fate, the spiritual world of the novel is having its own crisis with the death of Elder Zosima. In his final teachings, I just summarized Dostoevsky's theology, a sharp contrast to Ivan's nihilism.
Right. Zosima's entire life as a starets was inspired by a radical conversion experience, one that was rooted in violence and repentance.
The duel.
It was sparked by two moments, really. Zosima, a young officer at the time, was about to fight a duel. The night before, realizing the folly of it all, he recalled an earlier act of cruelty, striking his orderly, Afanasi, with such ferocious cruelty.
And this memory just hits him.
He has a profound spiritual epiphany. He realizes life is heaven, for we have only to understand that, and it will at once be fulfilled. The beauty of life comes from the capacity for repentance and what he calls active love.
He also carried this almost mystical teaching from his long-dead brother, Markel, and it feels like the cornerstone of Dostoevsky's vision of responsibility.
It is. It's the concept of universal responsibility, that everyone is really responsible to all men, and for everything.
It's an expansive, all-encompassing guilt.
It is, and it urges proactive, active love in the world, not passive, withdrawn contemplation. Zosima channels this. He encourages people who struggle with faith to engage in labor and fortitude. He says if you persevere in actively loving, even those you can't stand, you'll find faith when you think you're farthest from it.
But Zosima's profound spiritual power is immediately tested after his death, not by philosophy, but by a shocking physical scandal.
There's a tremendous moment of theological irony. Zosima's death was spiritually perfect. He sinks to his knees, bows, and kisses the ground in joyful ecstasy as he quietly gives up his soul.
What?
But this spiritual culmination is violently contrasted with the physical reality of the body. A smell of rapid decomposition, a scandal, began to emanate from the coffin with unusual speed.
And why is the decomposition a scandal? Why is that so significant?
It's scandalous because a traditional sign of great holiness, of sainthood, was the incorruptibility of the corpse. So rapid decay suggested Zosima was not truly holy.
A fact seized upon by his rivals.
Immediately. Particularly Father Ferapont, the harsh ascetic monk who had already called the Starets institution a pernicious and frivolous innovation. Dostoevsky uses this to show how this radical, merciful Christianity's Zosima's active love is immediately and violently rejected by the traditional judgmental church through the crudest of physical facts.
Meanwhile, the woman who ignited this whole tragedy, Grushenka, she's undergoing her own redemption. And it's partly informed by that powerful allegory of the onion story.
The onion story is Dostoevsky's powerful illustration of the minimum requirement for salvation. It's about a wicked peasant woman who died without a single good deed to her name.
But there was one thing.
One thing. An angel pleaded to God, noting she had once given a single onion to a beggar. So God permits the angel to take that onion to the lake of fire and pull the woman out.
And the moral of the story comes when her selfishness reasserts itself, right?
Yes. As she's being pulled out, the other sinners try to cling to her, hoping to be saved too. And she selfishly kicks them away, crying, "It's my onion, not yours." And at that moment, the single thread of kindness breaks, and she falls back into the lake.
A harsh lesson.
It is. Salvation requires a minimum act of kindness, but true redemption requires the continuation of active love and the rejection of selfish pride.
And Grushenka relates this, suggesting she sees herself as that wicked woman. But her actual change of heart is more immediate, isn't it? It happens when she finally meets the former seducer she'd idolized for years.
She had been emotionally tethered to this man for years. He had tormented her pride, fueled her vanity, created all this emotional toxicity. When he finally arrives, she's transformed. Because he wasn't the powerful figure she expected. He was a puny little beggar of a Pole, a total anticlimax.
The romanticized phantom was destroyed by the pathetic reality.
Right, and that moment of clarity immediately transfers her devotion to Mitya.
She realizes it's real love.
She realized the intensity she felt for Mitya was genuine love, replacing the tormented pride she felt for the Pole. When Mitya arrives at Mokro, she declares it. "A falcon flew in, and my heart sank. Fool, that's the man you love." She rejects her past for a genuine connection with Dmitri.
Okay, and this is the point where Ivan's highly structured, detached intellectual world is absolutely annihilated by guilt. He goes to see Smerdyakov, the valet, who is supposedly still recovering from his epileptic fit.
And Smerdyakov is this dark shadow of the family. He's weak, pale, but his illness is, as he chillingly reveals to Ivan, a complete sham. I shammed it all, he says.
And the core revelation is devastating.
It is. Smerdyakov murdered Fyodor Pavlovich, not Mitya, and stole the money that had driven Mitya insane.
But the physical act is somehow less horrifying than Smerdyakov's claim of intellectual complicity. He argues that Ivan is as much a murderer at heart. This is where Dostoevsky shows how lethal abstract ideas can be.
Smerdyakov claims that Ivan's repeated philosophical arguments, specifically that if there is no God, then everything is lawful, gave him the intellectual permission to do it. Smerdyakov is the logical conclusion of Ivan's philosophy. He didn't just murder the father. He weaponized Ivan's nihilism.
And the proof he offers is Ivan's hurried desire to leave for Moscow, which Smerdyakov read as tacit approval.
Yes, Smerdyakov asserts that Ivan stopped him at the gate and told him to leave to avoid trouble, which Smerdyakov interpreted as, "You can murder my parent, I won't hinder you." Smerdyakov needed that intellectual validation for his vile act. And Ivan, the mind behind the Grand Inquisitor, is suddenly confronted with the literal, murderous application of his own philosophy.
This guilt then unleashes Ivan's legendary psychological torture, the hallucination of the devil.
And the devil who visits Ivan is not Milton's Lucifer. He's a vulgar, stupid buffoon, a shabby middle-aged gentleman with perpetually bad manners.
He's the ultimate anticlimax.
He's the embodiment of Ivan's own worst, most embarrassing and intensely proud thoughts. The devil constantly mocks him, telling him, "You choose out only my worst thoughts, and what's more, the stupid ones."
So the devil isn't tempting Ivan to evil. He's just mirroring Ivan's self-loathing and intellectual vanity back at him.
Exactly. And this torment drives Ivan to the horrible self-realization of his intellectual guilt. He realizes his pride created this philosophy, and Smerdyakov merely executed it. Ivan understands he is now as much a murderer at heart as the actual killer. His collapse is the price he pays for rejecting Zosima's universal responsibility.
Okay, so following Mitya's chaotic arrest at Mokro, we get to the interrogation. And Mitya, driven by this warped sense of honor, simultaneously screams his innocence of parricide while providing every single piece of evidence they need to convict him.
It's tragic. He clings so desperately to the nuance of his financial situation. He's obsessed with proving that he wasn't a thief who spent Katya's entire 3,000 rubles.
Right. He argues that he was honorable enough not to spend the full sum, that the 1,500 found on him was separate from pawning pistols.
And his desperation to prove this minor point of honor tragically undercuts his claim of innocence on the major crime. He can't explain where the rest of the 3,000 went, which makes his frantic claim of not being a thief sound like a financial motive for murder.
And the investigators, these smooth, calculating types, they press him on the logistics of the crime, demanding to know about the signals he used.
And Mitya, in his indignation that they don't already know everything, mockingly provides the fatal undeniable detail. The 3 quick taps, 3 slower taps, 3 quick taps, which he used to lure his father out.
He just hands it to them.
He does. And that fact, along with the blood on his cuff from hitting Grigory, creates an overwhelming factual case against him. He's so fixated on clearing his soul of the theft that he seals his fate on the murder charge.
So the trial begins with the prosecutor, Ippolit Kirillovich, laying out this meticulous psychological case. What's his central thesis?
Kirillovich meticulously weaves Mitya's passion, threats, and motive, jealousy, and money into a cohesive narrative of premeditated crime. He argues the murder wasn't accidental, but contemplated as a possibility long before the act. He uses Mitya's volatile nature as proof, not just of motive, but of character.
And this leads to that famous rhetorical moment where he contrasts the Russian temperament with the European.
Yes, Kirillovich uses the trial to make a statement about the nature of the Russian soul. He declares, "They have their Hamlets, but we still have our Karamazovs."
Ow.
And that line suggests Mitya is the quintessential Russian criminal, driven not by existential indecision like Hamlet, but by uncontrollable, chaotic passion. A profound moral flaw he calls Karamazovism.
Then we get the defense, led by the celebrated lawyer Fetyukovich, who tries to pick this seamless narrative apart. His strategy seems to be more about muddying the waters than presenting a clear alternate reality.
Fetyukovich expertly discredits the prosecution's key witnesses. He attacks the old servant Grigory, focusing on his consumption of spirits. He harangues the old man, asking if he drank a tumblerful even, perhaps a tumbler and a half, casting serious doubt on Grigory's testimony.
And he also manages to expose the hypocrisy of the student, Rakitin.
Rakitin, the self-righteous socialist and rival to Ivan, had testified against Mitya. Fetyukovich exposes the fact that Rakitin is Grushenka's cousin and is deeply ashamed of it, undermining his testimony as just social climbing and self-interest.
He suggests everyone's motives are tainted.
Exactly. And he pushes the Smerdyakov theory, but his core defense of Mitya focuses on the implausibility of premeditation, given Mitya's personality.
He argues Mitya's actions after the crime are inconsistent with the murderer.
Right. The brass pestle was snatched by chance. He points out Mitya's honorable conduct at Mokro and his immediate self-reproach upon hearing of the murder are entirely inconsistent with a calculated killer. Vitukovich insists the true Karamazov, facing the consequences of parricide, would have immediately committed suicide.
It's a robust defense, but then the floor just falls out, and the entire tragedy of the Karamazov family comes to a head with Katerina Ivanovna's testimony. Her own pride and pain lead to this climactic, devastating betrayal.
In a fit of hysteria, wounded pride and pain over Mitya's rejection, Katya produces Mitya's drunken letter. She labels it the plan, the program of the murder, offering it as undeniable evidence of premeditation.
And she reveals the truly complex, almost cruel motive behind the 3,000 ruble loan, shattering the defense's whole argument about Mitya's flawed honor.
She reveals she gave him the money, not just out of love, but to test him, to prove to herself he possessed some shred of honor, knowing he'd likely spend it on Grushenka. When he did, it confirmed his baseness. By revealing this, she just irrevocably damages his defense. It's the final tragic fulfillment of the chaos bred in that house.
And the jury finds Mitya guilty. So now Mitya, innocent of the physical act but guilty of striking Grigory, is offered a chance at a physical escape by Ivan and Katya, of all people. 30,000 rubles, a flight to America with Grushenka.
The irony is profound, isn't it? The two people who most damaged his defense are now offering to buy his freedom. And Mitya immediately struggles with the moral weight of this plan.
He's torn.
He confesses to Alyosha that he's torn between the escape and his duty, some cross he has to bear in Siberia for his moral recklessness.
And his immediate reaction to the plan it speaks volumes.
His words are so telling. I hate that America already. The escape offers physical freedom, reunion with Grushenka, but it offers no moral peace. Mitya understands that the true prison is internal. He feels he has to embrace the suffering and responsibility, whether or not he struck the fatal blow.
So what this deep dive really reveals is Dostoevsky's genius in creating a world where every character is both innocent and guilty.
Intellectual rebellion from Ivan, reckless passion from Dmitri, spiritual devotion from Alyosha, they're all deeply intertwined with their father's legacy. They're collectively responsible for the chaos and the crime.
Mitya's flawed honor, Ivan's destructive nihilism, Fyodor's vile paternity, they all contributed to the murder. The sources show us that the guilt is never purely external, it's a shared inheritance.
That's right.
And the jury's verdict rested entirely on the accumulation of public, measurable facts, the blood, the pestle, the threats, Katya's testimony. They judged Mitya by his public actions and his inherent Karamazovism, but Mitya's real ordeal is internal. It's a confrontation with his conscience.
Yes.
He once believed in a miracle of divine providence to save him. The final question Dostoevsky leaves us with, building on Zosima's teaching that life requires embracing suffering, is this. Does a planned, costly escape, funded by the very people he has wronged, truly free Dmitri Karamazov? Or does it merely condemn him to a worse, more enduring internal prison than the physical suffering of Siberia? That choice between external freedom and internal conscience is the true, enduring legacy of the Karamazov tragedy, and it still resonates with us today.